Right, so welcome back to the 10-6 diaries. So this is episode number 12. So we're going to sort of start where I finished off last time, which was running my season's best of 11.01 with, I think it was like a plus 1.6 wind. So I was happy to finally, run a time that I thought that I was certainly capable of after having a few really rubbish times to start off the season. So that was like my fourth meet of the year. One thing is my knees were absolutely toasted afterwards. I had 3 days in a row of jumping, so my right knee just felt really sore. So I did some slow strength the day after. I did a really easy sort of training session the day after, just keeping everything really light. Mainly the idea of that training session was just to try and, keep my knees intact and make sure that I can last the rest of the season and that my knee doesn't just explode on me one day. So then Monday's workout was 3 days afterwards. I ended up running a hill sprint session, and I think I did some weights as well afterwards, but again kept it nice and light. And then on the Wednesday, plan was to try and get my first session back in, but I did the warm up and my adductor and I think my hamstrings were just feeling quite tight, so I cut it and I said, right, I'll rest another 2 days and then I will try and do the session. So did that, did some lifting, just to kind of again maintain a little bit of maintain volume, so I've got something to taper off of. Then I ran this session on the Friday, so it was sprint float sprint for 90 meters. So this was I think this was the first or second rep that you just saw there from the blocks, but then the final rep I managed to run a 10:35 without the reaction time, which is pretty close to where my form was last year. I think I'd ran about a 10:32 90 meter sprint float sprint rep, so honestly not really far off where I was last year, but I feel like I should definitely be quicker. But it is what it is. Just have to keep training, keep going, and eventually you'll improve and make improvements. But yeah, the 30 meters, I feel like my acceleration has really been decent. This 30 was a 4.09, and I feel like it's really been quite solid. I think it's just the max velocity that's sort of the missing link between sort of the level I feel like I should be at and the level I currently am at. But yeah, so that session wasn't really too bad. It was probably a pretty average session, I would say. Then went and did some lifts, did some snatches, hip snatches, I think did some squats as well, and did just a few other lifts. So this was some 80 kilo front squats, and then yeah, just a few lifts, just keeping it nice and light, just trying to maintain the strength I have built up. And that's really the the idea behind this this session, and in season lifting is just to try and maintain and not really to make improvements. So yeah, after that I did some jumps and I rolled my ankle. But the thing is, my ankle, I feel from all the jumping and sprinting that I've done over the years, my ankle tendons have just my ankle ligaments, have built up, just they're built of steel now, so they don't really roll. I rolled it and I was able to just kind of train the next day, and it didn't really feel sore to walk on. Even 5 minutes afterwards I was walking my dog. So I feel my ankles are in a pretty good place where they don't really roll super easy, and I think it's just because of all the training that I've done. So I was able to do this session 2 days afterwards without any problems. The only thing is I was really stiff that session, so I had to cut it and just move the session forward 2 days. So this is Tuesday, so this was the week of the meet. I was going to be competing on the Sunday, so this was my last sort of max effort hard day. First 2 reps I ran at 95% for 100 meters, and then the final one I pushed max effort, ended up running 11:22. So it's about a tenth and a bit off sort of where I have ran and what I ran last year for 100 meters in training. But yeah, as I say, I think it is just sort of the max velocity side of things that's just not really where it should be. And I think as well, what I should note is when I did run, I think it was an 11:07 or an 11:08 that I ran last year without the reaction time. When I did run that, it was with a big tailwind, so that's obviously something that's going to help out a lot. And obviously I'd ran that 100 meter rep indoors, so technically that was an indoor 100 meter personal best. But yeah, acceleration looked really good. It was just the max velocity wasn't amazing. So yeah, then did these lifts, and then this was my last hard day, and then I was going to taper off for the competition on the Sunday. So yeah, everything was going quite well. I was feeling, reasonable, feeling ready to go, and then I caught a cold, so it was either on the way up or on the way back down. I got the train to do that session up at the Emirates Arena because it was like raining earlier on in the day, and I ended up catching a cold, so I felt really bad on the Thursday, felt really ill on the Thursday. Then on the Friday I did my shakeout session for the meet, ended up, the first 10 meters was actually decent, like the first 10 meter block start was decent. It was then just like the 30 meter reps just seemed to be so incredibly flat, and I just did not feel, like I was in any sort of form to actually, run anything decent. I think it was like 4:17, which is just like very slow by my standards. That's kind of like times that I was running when I was like first reintroducing sprints after my like off season. So yeah, I wasn't happy with that, and I was sort of not really expecting much because I can usually sort of predict roughly how I'm going to perform based off my like 30 meter reps. So after running that, I was sort of like thinking, well, this probably, I shouldn't expect much now for the meet. Ended up running 10:91 for the first race with a plus 3.8, which matches my all conditions PB, and it's like a season's best for all conditions as well. So I was really happy with that. That was like, a pretty solid time considering I like had a cold. Like even on that day, like I could feel my nose was like blocked backing into the blocks, and I felt like in general the 10:91, I popped up out the start after maybe the first 2 or 3 steps, like more so than what I like usually would, and I felt like that sort of like threw the acceleration off. I roughly sort of worked out the splits for it, and it was like, a really slow first 30, but the max velocity and the speed endurance actually was quite solid. And then for the next race, just did my sort of usual warm-up, reduced the volume a little because you don't really need as much warming up when you've like ran a race prior. So did that, then got ready for the next race, took some caffeine, was all fired up, ready to go. Ended up running a 10:98 for the second race. So one thing I'll note is that my acceleration felt really good. Like I felt really good for the first 30 meters, but then I felt like I really died hard like after that. So one thing I would note is I did feel my fists were like clenched. About 70 meters in, I kind of like felt it, and then I like relaxed my hands a little bit for the final 30 meters, but the damage had sort of already been done. I'd already been running more tense than I should have been running. And as well, like I always sort of think that if you're in the zone, you're not going to be able to even think about like your fists being clenched or like your form or anything like that. So that kind of like tells me that, look, I ran like that 10:98 time, not being in the zone, not really being in like an amazing shape. So I do feel like there's definitely more in the tank, but I will have to, see what I can produce coming close to the end of the season. So the final race of the season will be the 3rd of September for me, so it's down in London. The Newham and Essex Beagles race, it's like an open meet for sprints, and you always run with a tailwind, so it's the same meet as the race that you just saw. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hoping to close out strong. So the next video will be the Scottish Championship prep and like the Scottish Championships. So I hope you enjoy that video. It should be a little bit longer, and I'm gonna say peace for now.